There's a spring in the step of the leaders of the UK Independence Party.
UKIP has become a force to be reckoned with in British politics.
He is a UK politician with a US following.
The party is influencing the national agenda.
The UK Independence Party is the biggest story in British politics for 25 years. All over the country, thousands suddenly feel they've found their voice.
This is the most powerful new political movement that's emerged in Britain for the best part of a generation.
UKIP, as a political party in this country, is on the march.
I think we should care about any new political party within a party system that really doesn't have that many new parties, that doesn't have that many successful challenges.
It is our intention that we cause an earthquake in British politics.
Quite a shock to suddenly have a party like UKIP getting 25% of the support in opinion polls.
We are now changing the face of British politics.
Saying, sod off the lot of you, none of you got a clue, that's why people need to hear our voice. That's refreshing at first. But if you then say we've got the answers to the problems that we've raised, you have to get more serious.
Revolt on the Right by Robert Ford and Matthew Goodwin is the first book to put the UKIP revolution under the spotlight.
The reason we wanted to write the book is because this is the most powerful new political movement that's emerged in Britain for the best part of a generation.
It's going to be a very exciting period in British politics. I'm lucky we've got a book that explains a great deal about what's going on.
It's important to understand that when UKIP says, actually we're just a bunch of people talking common sense about the EU, there's actually a lot more going on there than that.
The academics who go out and do the hard slog of finding out the empirical data about who's a member of an organisation, who votes for different parties, and what their social and economic profile is extremely valuable.
If we don't study this kind of stuff, the conventional wisdoms trump, and they dominate, and these kinds of historic developments remain misunderstood. There was a historian called Richard Hofstadter who said that new challenger parties were a bit like bees, that once they've stung the party system, they die. And in many respects, we found that UKIP are more like a wasp. They keep coming back and back with new barbs, and they're stinging the British system over and over again.
Well, their first successes came in European Parliament elections. In 2004 they came third, then in 2009 they pushed Labour into third place, came second, demonstrated that they were a mass political movement, 17 percentage points of the vote.
Everywhere we went, people met us, they were pleased to see us, and it didn't matter whether they'd been Tories or Labour or Lib Dems, or perhaps hadn't voted for anybody for 20 years. They were keen to say they were behind UKIP.
More recently, they've started to show the same kind of strength in domestic elections, and really crucial here was the 2013 local elections. They polled 24% of the overall vote. One voter in four who voted in those elections voted UKIP, and absolutely critically, more than 100 local councillors in UKIP colours. So that enabled them to say to their critics, yes, we really are a force domestically. UKIP was born in 1993. It was founded by a history lecturer called Alan Sked, and it was initially founded essentially as a pressure group to force the issue of Britain's membership of the European Union onto the political agenda. And for most of the first 10 years of its existence, that's pretty much what it was. It was a sort of anti-EU lobbying group. But in the past 10 years, it's kind of blossomed out into a much more broad-based party, and Nigel Farage has been a key part of that. And we've now arrived at the point where UKIP is essentially the third or fourth force in British politics.
You want to know about populism and understand it. You want to know who is involved with it and who votes for it, who supports it.
One of the unique things about UKIP, in fact, is that they are drawing support from all quarters of the political spectrum.
The stereotype is of UKIP in the Shires. Lots of old, retired people in golf clubs used to be Tory members who've now got very angry about gay marriage or Europe who are all voting for UKIP. And that's really all that's been focused on. But there's a lot going on elsewhere.
There was lots that surprised me actually. I mean, in terms of the working class roots of UKIP's revolt, to a certain extent, the extent of that was quite surprising.
So the figures are very clear. A third of our voters voted Tory in 2010. 2/3 of our voters didn't.
We can represent the whole of the United Kingdom.
Ed Miliband's seat, for example, Labour got 34,000 votes in 1992, and in 2010 they only got 19,000 votes. So there's 15,000 lost voters there, and in the north they're not going to vote Tory because the Tories are very toxic in the north. I think 40% of people have said they'd never vote for them whatever happened. Now the Lib Dems used to kind of feel this sort of need for a protest party, and now obviously with being in coalition they can't do that anymore. So, and then into this sort of big space comes UKIP.
So what of the party of the moment? Well, UKIP have won 147 council seats. That's an increase of 139.
The UKIP voter is spread throughout the country. They're not retired colonels, but they're also not young cosmopolitans in cities either.
Nigel Farage is really just seen as the antithesis of all the other politicians.
They're looking for somebody that hasn't just come up through, private school and then gone into politics. They want people who are real people.
Piece of fruitcake, Nigel. I haven't got a problem with a bit
Yeah,
of
you're
fruitcake.
right.
I've no
Enjoy it.
difficulty.
It will not give you an upset stomach, I guarantee you.
They can abuse us as much as they want, and the more they throw all these words at us, the more people vote for us, so that's fine by me.
They don't necessarily want to go into the detailed policy, they just want to hear someone straight talking.
The mainstream political parties, they make politics a very technical business. We'll give you this policy on this and this policy on that. Everything's a little bit of a cost and a benefit and so on. It's almost an accounting game. The thing that sets UKIP apart is that they take a bunch of voters who feel left out by that process, who feel that their views, their identities aren't expressed by these politicians, and just give them a voice.
He's still seen as someone who speaks his mind, and he doesn't kind of turn himself into knots about worrying about political correctness.
Over to Nigel with the weather.
Thanks, Andrew. And now the weather for all areas of the British Isles, but definitely not Bongo Bongo land.
Official population figures don't seem to chime with the everyday experiences of the British people, and concerns over immigration control are central to UKIP's agenda.
Immigration is driving more UKIP votes than Europe. Immigration's been quite high. People don't think it's handled well, and so UKIP are getting the votes of people who are least happy about that.
They've got some good policies, I think.
Such as?
Immigration. I'm not being racist, but they've got the right idea.
Just their policies, basically, with keeping the borders under control, etc.
Open door immigration and cheap labour affects the working classes more than it affects anybody else.
I think the biggest foreign policy failure in British politics in the last 10 years is not the Iraq war or Afghanistan, it's the fact that Poland wants to join the euro.
The Polish immigration of the last 10 years is the biggest wave of immigration in British history. That's part of the deal of being in the European Union.
Someone like Farage will say the EU has brought in all these people flooding into this country, filling it up, making it un-British. You can say to people, as Nick Robinson said to Nigel Farage just the other week, did you know that without migrants in this country we'd all be worse off? And actually a lot of people will say, well, I simply don't believe that, because they've been told so many times that this country has become a target for people flooding in thanks to the EU, and they sign on the dole.
According to a range of academic studies, serious academic studies, more is put in than taken out.
Is UKIP a standalone case, or are they part of a wider shift to the right in Europe?
UKIP are a very polarising party. Everyone has an opinion on who they are and what they're about.
Some people see them as the saviours of the country, and some people see them as the British Front National, BNP gone serious, which is obviously a real threat.
Conservative BNP in a bloody suit. You as much of a guy to be better than next bloody gripper.
It's unfair to UKIP to say you're just the BNP with blazers. They're a different party with different roots. They turned up to oppose the European Union. They didn't turn up to send everybody back. It's a more moderate, I think, expression of the anxieties that people feel, which I think makes it more mainstream, but also means it might influence the mainstream more. So it might be more potent because, in a way, it's more moderate.
Both the BNP and UKIP are parties that appeal to voters who feel rejected by the political system, left behind by the social and economic changes of the past 30 years, and deeply anxious about the cultural changes that immigration has come to symbolise for them. So there are some similar core appeals there. The big difference between UKIP and the BNP is the BNP is a party with an openly fascist legacy, and we in Britain have rejected that kind of politics very explicitly for a long time. So the BNP's political appeal was always going to be very limited. 4-5% at most. You would get people who say, yeah, I agree with you on immigration, Nick Griffin, but we fought a war against your kind of politics, we're never going to vote for you. UKIP, Nigel Farage, they don't have that reputational baggage, that reputational issue, so they can move into this same emotional populist politics, this sentiment politics, and make a similar kind of appeal, but also say, we are mainstream, we are inclusive, we are tolerant, we are part of the political conversation. All that we're doing is bringing your voice to the table. That makes them a much more potent political force than the BNP ever could be.
The vast majority of UKIP supporters, I think it's fair to say, are probably 50 and older, and they're bewildered by the new, the shock of the new that's coming in. And I think what Nigel Farage represents is a return to that sort of more simple kind of Hovis advert style of England.
But also an expression of there are things going on in the world as I experience it that I'm not happy about and that I haven't been asked about. Some of that's about politics, some of it's about political correctness gone mad in a slightly inchoate way. The things that people talk about as reasons to vote UKIP is that you don't have, nativity plays in schools anymore, although I've been to some. Or you're not allowed to wear your England shirt on the bus, which you are actually. So it's a feeling that your identity isn't recognised if you're an older, more traditional, whiter, sometimes Christian, member of British society, that other people get a voice and that you don't get a voice, so maybe UKIP's your chance to redress the balance.
Democracy requires that people engage, take part in the conversation, and we're starting to lose that with sections of the electorate.
Well, by definition, if we're getting people who've not been voting for 20 years coming back to re-engage with the ballot box, that isn't a protest. That's a positive sign that we as a party are re-engaging people in this country who want to re-enter the democratic system.
It's often said that people don't care about politics, and one thing that UKIP has done is shown that lots of people who previously didn't vote do care a lot about politics, and therefore Labour, Tories and Lib Dems can't pretend about that any longer.
We've seen probably the most worrisome of all, a major hemorrhaging of trust in parties, in government, in politicians.
If the British people finally get their referendum on Europe, what will happen to UKIP?
Until we see UKIP MPs getting up in Parliament, you can't really say, well, they're a part of the political conversation in the same way as the other three big parties are.
In the north of England, where they're beginning to make inroads into Labour's vote, that they're beginning to be seen as the opposition to Labour.
But UKIP are your main challengers here, aren't they? I mean, that's why you've done this leaflet. All this stuff about UKIP on the back rather than about the Conservatives.
And we've said things about the Conservatives, we've said things about the Lib Dems as well.
But you haven't done half a leaflet on them, have you?
We are, I'm sure we've done lots of leaflets about the Lib Dems and the Conservatives.
If Labour concede on an EU referendum and win the election, I think we will almost certainly be outside the European Union after 2017.
It will be a challenge for UKIP to go from being a party of protest to being a party of parliament and a party of power, and it would change the way they operate, because saying, sod off the lot of you, none of you got a clue, that's why people need to hear our voice, that's refreshing at first. But if you then say we've got the answers to the problems that we've raised, you have to get more serious.
For UKIP to get even say five MPs, they need to do an incredible amount of work to develop alternative personalities, alternative stories in the party, because the story of UKIP really is too easily written off the story of Farage, and they need to overcome that.
We are going to see campaigns, we're going to see immigration campaigns, we're going to see ongoing, quite inflammatory stuff.
You can't govern from the Daily Mail editorial page. You have to start thinking about, well, what are the decisions we make here? And the risk is, if the noise from the UKIP machine gets too loud, as it were, it drowns out any possibility of a proper, reasoned debate about the issues that they're bringing back into politics.
The key question for Farage and UKIP, and something that we find in our book, is whether they can then take that coalition on and keep them loyal at a general election.
I'm very confident actually that we've got a culture of being confident about who we are, and actually the test of all political forces, including UKIP, is whether they can appeal to the country we're going to be, not just give people a sort of nostalgic feeling about a country that we're not anymore.